And I'm sorry, I apologize, I don't speak Romanian. I do have Romanian roots, but not a good enough Romanian to be able to present in it. So yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad I'm able to finalize this discussion, at least the presentation part, because as Gabriel said, it's a more of a global view, a general view of how everything you said kind of connects together. So do I have the clicker? Oh yeah. So just to present myself, I've studied philosophy, politics, and economics, and then environmental policy at the University of Oxford, and then joined the United Nations-backed Principles for Responsible Investment, which is an investors initiative, a global investors initiative that brings together institutional investors, mainly asset owners such as pension funds and investment managers, and they've come together to kind of articulate what ESG means, what a responsible investment is. So it's been a very interesting process. I'm also the head of the Impact Forum at the Eli Horowitz Institute for Strategic Management at the Tel Aviv University, and I lead the ESG course for directors at Tel Aviv University, and I'm the chair of trustees at Oxford University's climate network, Alumni Climate Network. I also advise the Israeli government and the Bank of Israel and the new Israeli Sovereign Wealth Fund on how to implement ESG issues, because this is such an overarching trend that is happening in the world at the moment and really changes the landscape for businesses everywhere. So I'm going to show you 3 exponential graphs now just to demonstrate how strong this trend is becoming. The first one is really of the PRI, the organization that I just mentioned, that I've been a part of. And this is an organization that started already in 2006 when institutional investors started thinking about sustainable investment, started thinking about the risks that environmental, social, and governance issues pose for their investments. And they've come together and kind of put these principles in place. And as you can see, this has become really the baseline now. So now almost all the big institutional investors, definitely in the developed world, but also it's starting to catch more and more in the developing world as well, have joined this initiative. This means that all of these investors and all of these assets under management that you can see in this graph are already implementing ESG to a certain extent. And they're also reporting on what they're doing every year, and it's available online, so this is transparent. It's completely transparent. You can see what they're looking at and what they're demanding of their investees and the companies they invest in. Another big graph is the policy one. So this is the number of policy actions, either voluntary or mandatory regulations, policy instructions, rules, laws that have been introduced in the last years. And you can see this has grown exponentially, as I said, and continues to grow every minute. And we can see, you can actually see a map, a detailed map of which countries introduced which regulations on this topic on the PRI website as well. So we see it coming from government, we see it coming from the investment industry, and we also see the demand from the public, okay? So literally in the last year, we've seen such a huge growth in the number of ETFs that are branded ESG that it's incredible. So we are really seeing huge demand for things that are marked ESG, that are marked environmental, that are marked social, that are marked well governance. So coming back to the discussion we had here before, the money in the world is really looking for projects that are transitioning into renewable energy, that are really looking to get there, and they're really looking to put more on their portfolios because this is becoming such a strong branding issue even for investors. The next slide is about what's happening in civil society. So this is also something that's been kind of percolating for a long time, but has now peaked. With the climate, the Conference of Parties, climate talks, the UN climate talks gaining more and more attention on the global sphere, on the global stage, which didn't used to be the case. It used to be kind of a sidelined thing, and now it's becoming very much the center of attention. There's a lot of pressure on companies, there's a lot of pressure on investors to do this also from the bottom. So kind of to summarize that, we have this chain of investments where at the top we have beneficiaries, we have who give their money to pension funds to invest it for them. Then we have the asset owners investing this money, looking at ESG issues as they give a mandate to investment managers to look at environmental issues. Then investment managers go and take this and when they look at companies, when they do due diligence, after they invest as well as active owners. And between them, we also have the rating agencies, which have taken a lot of the stage recently because many investors have not had the resources to actually invest in understanding how to look at ESG issues. And they buy ready-made ratings of rating agencies that look at these things. So these are kind of the powers that are surrounding, these are the powers that are shaping this mega trend of ESG taking over. Of course, also policy from above and civil society from below. But there's an issue with ESG, and I think as energy companies, you must know this. This is a tweet by Elon Musk just last week. He said that ExxonMobil is within the S&P ESG rating, but Tesla isn't. And we all know Tesla is creating a product which is sustainable, okay? They're doing something that is supposedly good for the environment. But still they received a very low ESG rating. ESG doesn't look only at environmental impact, it also looks at social issues, at employment issues, at governance. You've mentioned this about retention of employment. Governance issues and social issues are very, very important for the generation Y and Z. Of course, environmental issues, that's an obvious, but also social and governance issues. So that's a big thing. And Tesla, even though it has supposedly good environmental impact, has or allegedly has issues with the way it's managed. So they haven't received very high ratings. They were pushed out of the S&P ESG, and that of course made Elon Musk quite angry. But it shows that there is an issue. There is a problem with how ESG is looking at things. I think the good thing about it is, and I'm going to try to explain it by this little spectrum, is that it really looks at profit. Okay, it doesn't say, let's look at environmental issues, at social issues, at governments because we like it, because we think it's good for the planet. It doesn't say that. It says, we're only looking at this through a lens of risk and opportunity. And I think that is something that you've mentioned as well, right, about the 3 Cs initiative. It doesn't work if there's no IRR. It doesn't work if there's no bottom line. This is not philanthropy. And it also, I think, shapes the way this current wave of green energy is looking, renewable energy is looking like. Because if the first wave was very much induced by governments and incentives, it was a bit fake in a way, and then a lot of entrepreneurs got burnt by the fact that they've changed it, right? They changed the feed-in tariffs in hindsight. So this second wave really shows that there's a trend, a global trend backing this. There's a global trend that says, okay, now where the money is going, we're seeing profits, not just because governments are bringing these tariffs and incentives that are not real or might be changing afterwards. This is something that is actually happening. So the real difference is that ESG is closer to traditional investments in a way that it looks risk and opportunity and looks at these issues. And on the other hand, we have impact investments, which look at the outcomes in the world. So if ESG is more about processes, we're trying to kind of understand where the risk is. Impact is about what is it actually doing out there in the world? How do we measure the outcomes of the investment? And I think the renewable energy market can be obviously an ESG product, but also can present itself as impact because it has measurable outcomes in the world. And there are a lot of investors that are now moving from ESG because of criticism like Elon Musk, and also because of the fact that ESG is becoming a baseline. It's becoming something that everybody reports on every year normally. And it's kind of moving into impact, looking for those investments that have an outcome in the world that is measurable and accountable. So we mentioned materiality, which is the reason why investors look at ESG. They need to see material issues, things that really affect the bottom line when they're looking at these investments. So to kind of summarize, materiality, one of the main issues is this affecting my bottom line. Standard, this is an industry standard. Now everybody is doing this, so we have to do this as well. And then third is regulation. Really, regulation, especially in Europe, is becoming mandatory and it's very difficult to escape it. Now, I come from Israel, and Israel is very much behind on ESG issues. And it's behind because it was never the priority. People have, let's say, more important things that they call it to look at. And I feel like now, because of regulation and because of the fact that this is a standard, it's really seeping in, and we see a lot of interest in this, even from areas that aren't supposedly should be interested in this. So I think even if you think this is currently something that is far away, it is really seeping through. Finance is totally speaking this language, and it comes into all of the different industries, and obviously to the energy industry. Two examples of the energy industry, we'll finish with that. So one of them is ExxonMobil. I don't know if you've heard of this, but last year, a small hedge fund, activist hedge fund named Engine Number One, said that ExxonMobil is not doing enough to transition to net zero, to transition to ESG. They're not managing it well, and that's why they're not doing as well as other energy companies. They ran a huge campaign, and they've managed to put in actually 3 board seats, and they changed 3 board seats at ExxonMobil just because of ESG and climate issues. So this is something that energy companies are very much affected by, and they need to look at it. A second example, which is a legal one, is Shell. I don't know if you've had the chance to discuss it. I'm sorry I couldn't be here yesterday to hear everything. But Shell had net zero commitments that they've made, and they were sued for not actually going to meet these commitments, and they lost the case. So it currently means that directors in energy companies are liable also to the transition to ESG, to environmental issues. Of course, they're appealing on this case, but as it is at the moment, this is a precedent, and it's very clear that if you are in an energy company, if you are in a pension fund, and you need to consider this huge megatrend of ESG and how it affects everything. I just put this, I'm sure you all already know the EU taxonomy and how it changes the landscape in that sense. And I want to finish with this thought of ultra long term. I think pension funds specifically, who have to take care of the investment of their beneficiaries for the very long term, they have to make sure that it makes sense in a long time. And as my friend here said, we have a problem of predictability. In the short term, it can be very, very volatile at the moment. And we need to look at trends in a much, much further view. Of course, we're transitioning now from fossil fuels, but where are we leading? Where are we going? Where is the profit going to be in 100 years, not 20 years, like ESG is looking at? So I invite you to put your email there, and we're going to update about these things if you're interested in them. And yeah, I just encourage everybody to think about long-term beyond ESG and what's happening there.